if there's ever a time where people are fed up about the overreaching power of government, it's during this pandemic lockdown. You know, for good or for bad, whether it's incorrect or incorrect, people are very frustrated right now with power. They're very frustrated right now with the draconian measures that some states have put in place to keep people from working and, in their eyes, keep people safe.
You do not have a right to be free from offense, right? There is no constitutional right to a safe space. But that doesn't mean you do nothing. That doesn't mean you have no opinion. That doesn't mean you have no political power. What it does mean is that you have to recognize that everyone has the right to their own opinion, even terrible opinions. What we have to protect is the speech, is the platform, is the assembly, is the association, is the process that allows us to understand and recognize and identify when people did break the law, when they did harm others, to go to a fair trial where the jury can consider why they did what they did, and not just whether it was legal or illegal, but whether it was moral or immoral, whether it was right or whether it was wrong, and whether they are the lowest person, you know, the most ordinary citizen in the country, or the highest elected official, hold them to the same standard of behavior, the same rule of law. Whereas today, you know, we call them public officials and private citizens, but with all of the surveillance, all of the data collection, people in power, commercially or governmentally, they know everything about us, and we know nothing about them. We break the smallest law, we go to jail, we get a fine, we get screwed, we can't get a job, we can't get a loan. But if they, you know, flagrantly abuse their office, their authority, they get a pass. They go on the speaker's circuit. You know, it's all sunshine and rainbows for them. And the way we change these things is remembering our principles and being willing to stand and defend them.
It's also instinctual for people to be partisan, and it's tribal. It's a tribal thing. And in this day and age, people are rabidly partisan. And the rejection of nuance is so disturbing to me. And it's so disturbing that a lot of this happens from the left now, whereas the left used to be all about freedom of speech. The ACLU is, I mean, it's just, you automatically think of the liberal people when you think of the ACLU. But
the ACLU,
today,
just for the record, is a nonpartisan organization.
Yes. But supported overwhelmingly
Certainly, yeah.
by left-wing people. I mean, obviously they are nonpartisan, but people are so partisan today that this rejection of nuance, it's so easy for people to look at things as left versus right and ignore all of the sins of their team and concentrate on defeating the other side. And it seems to be a giant part of the problem today, so much so that people are in favor, a lot of people are in favor of deplatforming people that just simply disagree with them. And I want to talk to you about that because that seems to be a gigantic issue. Not seems to be. It is a gigantic issue with social media, whether it's with Twitter or YouTube or many things. In fact, Unity 2020 is something that my friend Brett Weinstein is putting together, this idea that we should look across both parties for people that are reasonable and rational people and look at what we agree with rather than simply sitting on partisan policy, on party lines and only voting, you know, blue across the board or red across the board. And let's look at reasonable people from both sides, whether it's Dan Crenshaw and Tulsi Gabbard or whoever it is that they represent different parties, but they're both reasonable people. Let's get them together and have these communications. They were banned from Twitter. They were simply banned from Twitter for simply saying, reject both Trump and Biden, look for a third choice. So this is not, there's nothing offensive about what they did. In fact, they're encouraging choice. They're encouraging this idea that we don't have to be a two-party system. That, in fact, even though we have had libertarian and green parties, we kind of look at it like bullshit. It's like a protest vote. If you vote Green Party, you know you're not going to elect that person for president. I mean, it's kind of like we tolerate it. But when someone like Ross Perot came around, it threw a monkey wrench into the gears and became very dangerous for both sides because the Republicans lost a lot of votes, and that's how Bill Clinton got into office and George H.W. Bush did not get a second term. Directly because of the influence of Ross Perot. So they changed the requirements for getting into the debates, and everything became very different and very more complicated after that. The fact that that Twitter would be willing to ban Unity 2020, specifically because they're calling for people to walk away from this idea that you have to either vote for Trump or Biden, and trying to get mainstream acceptance of a potential third-party candidate is extremely disturbing. But deplatforming in general, I think, is extremely disturbing because it's a slippery slope. If you decide that someone has views that are opposite of yours and they bother you, those views bother you, and you could do whatever you can to get them off of a platform, it's very dangerous because someone from the right who gains power, or someone from an opposing party that gains power, if they get into a position of power in social media, if they own a gigantic social media company like Twitter or YouTube, and they decide in turn to go after people that agree with your ideology, well, then we have a freedom of speech issue, and you're literally supporting the suppression of freedom of speech if you're supporting deplatforming people on social media. And I've always thought that the answer to someone saying something you disagree with, or someone saying something you vehemently oppose, is a better argument. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be you should expose the problems in what they're doing. And I'm seeing so many people, particularly on the left, that are happy when people get deplatformed, and people that just are contrary to their perspective, contrary to their ideology. And I think it's very dangerous, and it's too easy. It's too easy to accept. And this goes back to what you're saying. This partisan viewpoint that we have today, fiercely, rabidly partisan, in a way that I've never seen in my life.
Yeah, I think the question of deplatforming, this is one of the central issues of our time that's really overlooked, and it's underappreciated. So many people on both sides are in favor of this when it's somebody they don't like, right?
Yes.
The central issue is this: do we want companies deciding what can and cannot be said? Do we want governments deciding what can and cannot be said?
Well, it also gets tricky when you decide that someone is saying something that's offensive and you remove them from the platform, and then you open the door for other things being offensive, things that maybe aren't offensive to you. And the slope gets slippery, and then you have wrong speak. You have newly dictated language that you have to use. You have new restrictions on ideologies, things you're not allowed to espouse. I mean, Twitter will ban you for dead naming someone. They will ban you for life, meaning if you transition to be a woman and you call yourself Edwina and I call you Edward, I will be banned for life with no recourse, which is madness. It's mad because I can call you fuckface and no one has a problem with it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I could call you I could call you that, and there's no problem. But if I choose a name that used to accurately represent you as a different gender, because this is some new, incredibly important distinction that we've decided, it takes precedence over everything else, including it's more significant than insults, more significance than demeaning of, I can call you a moron, I could demean your intellect, all those things are fine. But if I choose to call you by a name that used to accurately represent you when you were a different gender, or when you identified with a different gender, because of today's political climate, that is grounds for banning you for life. It shows you how incredibly slippery censorship can get, because I would have never imagined that. If you said to me 10 years ago, well, when someone becomes a transgender person 10 years ago, if you said this to me, If someone becomes a transgender person, you call them by their original name, you could be banned from social media for life. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. They'll never get to that. No one's going to be that unreasonable. That's crazy. Because you could call some people so many disparaging and insulting names, but you can't say their name that isn't even insulting. Dead naming. That's what it's called. So it just shows you dead naming of today. You agree with that today? That opens up the door for all kinds of crazy shit. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if we still get more and more rabidly politically polarized, and our idea of PC culture gets more and more extreme, you're on a greased hill